Good afternoon. The mayor of the Dutch city of Rotterdam has condemned what he's called an orgy of violence after protesters took to the streets to demonstrate against coronavirus restrictions. The Netherlands is one of a number of places in Europe to reimpose a lockdown because of a surge in cases. The World Health Organization has called for an urgent tightening of measures across Europe to halt spiralling transmission rates of the virus. From Rotterdam, our Europe correspondent Anna Holligan reports.
Rotterdam, the Netherlands' second city, scarred by a night of rage. Riot police came from across the country to try to quell the uprising. They fired warning shots, then live rounds, in response to scenes condemned by Rotterdam's mayor as an orgy of violence.
De politie is op verschillende momenten zwaar geattackeerd.
On several occasions, police officers had to draw their weapons to defend themselves. Some aimed shots were fired. At least 7 were injured.
Restrictions in the Netherlands began last Saturday and will be in place for another 2 weeks at least. These streets are peaceful now, but the atmosphere across the country remains volatile. The Netherlands is battling record infection rates, and the government is considering new restrictions targeting the unvaccinated. In Austria today, supporters of the far-right Freedom Party marched against mandatory coronavirus vaccines. A 20-day lockdown will start next week. Working from home will be ordered and only essential shops will stay open. Germany fears a national healthcare emergency. New measures are expected for those who haven't had their jabs. A full lockdown is still on the cards. The UK isn't yet seeing such a dramatic surge in cases, and these are some of the reasons why.
Many countries in Europe were faced with Delta a little bit later, so they're dealing with it now. And some of them opened up slightly later than we did, so that's a factor. The second point is there's differences in vaccines. You've got high levels of non-vaccine uptake in some populations in some European countries.
High infection rates have helped to build up immunity in the UK. Now the push to encourage people to get their booster jabs continues. The incentive for many, the avoidance of harsher rules like those enforced elsewhere. Anna Holligan, BBC News.
There have been calls for calm in the United States after yesterday's court verdict that cleared a teenager of murder. 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse had argued that he was acting in self-defense when he shot dead 2 men and injured a third during unrest last year over a police shooting of a black man. The not guilty verdict has divided the country, as our North America correspondent Nomia Iqbal now reports.
Hundreds of people marched through New York in protest at the verdict. In the city of Portland, a riot broke out after protesters smashed windows and threw rocks at police, but nothing on the scale of last year's unrest.
I'm alive, but what could have happened?
After the verdict came out, Kyle Rittenhouse spoke to one of America's most conservative talk show hosts, Tucker Carlson.
The jury reached the correct verdict. Self-defense is not illegal. And I believe they came to the correct verdict, and I'm glad that everything went well. And it's been a rough journey, but we made it through it. We made it through the hard part.
The case goes beyond what happened in this courthouse in Kenosha. For most Republican politicians, Kyle Rittenhouse is a brave patriot who was simply defending himself that night after being chased. But many Democrats are worried that by not being held accountable for killing 2 men and injuring a third, it sends a dangerous message. The Vice President said the decision reflected poorly on the justice system.
The verdict really speaks for itself. As many of you know, I've spent a majority of my career working to make the criminal justice system more equitable, and clearly there's a lot more work to do.
President Biden said he understood the anger and concern by some, but struck a more measured tone.
I stand by what the jury has concluded. The jury system works and we have to abide by it.
This case has exposed so many divisions that already exist in America about gun laws, racism, and left versus right. The story of this teenager will do almost nothing to bring those sides together. Nomia Iqbal, BBC News, Kenosha.
After months of pressure for the government following record numbers of people crossing the channel in small boats, ministers have launched a review. With me is our political correspondent Ian Watson. Ian, what's this review going to achieve?
Well, quite frankly, Rita, the government's got to be seen to be doing something. 24,000 crossings so far this year. That's about 3 times the level of last year. And that's frankly embarrassing for a government that pledged to take back control of the border. In fact, only yesterday the Labour leader was weighing in, saying the government was not delivering on its promises. Now, I'm told, obviously, the Prime Minister is rather frustrated by the continuing crisis. So what he wants to see is the same level of grip attached across government departments to this issue as there is on tackling COVID. And he's designated Steve Barclay, the Cabinet Office Minister, as his problem solver. Now, Mr Barclay is going to be drinking from this poisoned chalice over the next week or so. And I'm told he'll also, amongst other things, be looking at whether any new policies are required. But there's already been really big interventions, £54 million going to France to try to stop people setting sail in the first place. It's not clear a review is necessarily going to be any more successful, and critics would say the government's got to do more to tackle the underlying reasons why people wish to migrate.
Ian, thank you. Ian Watson there. Now, in other news, there's growing concern over the safety of the Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai, who made sexual assault allegations against a former Chinese vice premier 2 weeks ago. She hasn't been seen since. Photos have been posted on social media under her name with the caption "Happy Weekend," but there's some scepticism about their authenticity. Hundreds of Tesla drivers have been locked out of their vehicles following a technical problem. The company's founder, Elon Musk, has apologised after a fault with the app stopped customers connecting to their car. Tesla said the problem should now be resolved. And in America, the highway was strewn with cash after an armoured vehicle had a minor accident. Bags of notes fell out of an open door when the vehicle was near San Diego. The authorities are appealing to those who picked up the money to hand it back. Football now, and there was a convincing win for Chelsea as they took on Leicester at the King Power Stadium. A 3-0 victory leaves Chelsea tightening their grip at the top of the Premier League. Here's our sports correspondent, Patrick Geary.
Summer already feels distant. That hazy May day when Leicester beat Chelsea in the cup final was historic, yet now slightly dated. 2 weeks later, Chelsea became champions of Europe. Maybe now they're heading towards conquering England. Antonio Rudiger, their number 2, with their number 1. Soon Leicester were confronting their past. This is N'Golo Kante, who drove them to the league title 5.5 years ago. Now he drove Chelsea further clear. Something's missing with Leicester, depleted by injuries, shorn of old certainties. Jamie Vardy once scored those automatically. Here's what it looks like when you get it right. Every Chelsea pass and move perfectly measured until Christian Pulisic finished things off. For some in the Leicester end, time to beat the traffic. For Chelsea, no need. Everyone else is in the rearview mirror. Patrick Geary, BBC News.
And finally, a host of celebrities appeared for last night's Children in Need appeal.
A whopping £39,389,048. As you can see, nearly £40 million was pledged. That's higher than last year's figure on the night. The money will go towards supporting thousands of charities and local projects around the UK. Well, there's more throughout the evening on the BBC News channel. We are back with the late news at 10 past 10. But now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Bye-bye.